Hi everybody, I'm Tim from troutandfeather.com, and as you can see, we have a special guest for this episode. I'm sitting next to Gilbert. Who is Gilbert? Gilbert is a fishing guide for Iceland Fishing Guide. I'm in Iceland right now. We're in the middle of an Atlantic salmon / brown trout fly fishing trip, and I realized this guy knows a heck of a lot about Atlantic salmon. Can we pick your brain?
Oh yes.
Awesome, thanks for being on the show. All right, let's do this everybody. Stay tuned. So we've had just an absolutely insane week catching both Atlantic salmon and brown trout. The Atlantic salmon are being caught basically behind me in the Myrechrist River, just a special river. Though the brown trout we've been catching on, I don't want to say the Laxa River because there's so many. How do I pronounce it?
Laxá í Aðaldal.
Oh my God. Anytime I point to him, you're gonna know why, because I don't speak very great Icelandic, but I love this country. I love fly fishing here. It's just a very special place. So an entire group came with me. We had 8 fly fishers. We've all caught an Atlantic salmon. You heard that right. Every single person landed an Atlantic salmon on the fly. I'd love to say that luck wasn't involved, but it was. But I realized there's a lot more to Atlantic salmon fishing that I had no idea about. All right, so we're outside the Myrechrist Fishing Lodge, Iceland Fishing Guide. Gilbert's got 6 years guiding on the Myrechrist River. He's got some tips for us. What's your first tip?
My general rule is to fish with big flies when it comes to rough, fast water. And the slower the water, the smaller the flies. Usually big flies, big strips. Small flies, small strips. Casting 45 degrees downstream and mending upstream is usually the way to go. Sometimes we even use big flies that are heavy and we cast them upstream and we strip them faster than the current.
So you were saying small fly, small strip. I noticed I was in the midst of doing small fly, small strip, and I paused. And a fish followed and then turned away. Do you have any tips or just any cadence for people to kind of say, like, you want to strip, but you don't want to stop stripping? Is that truthful to say it like that?
Yeah. If you get a boil from a fish that comes up and just hits the fly but doesn't really take it, it's very important to just keep on stripping.
Okay.
Because they can come for the second time.
So if I'm hearing you right, it's once you start stripping, you don't stop until that fish starts to nibble away.
No.
Okay.
You keep on going.
Okay.
I like to fish light colored flies whenever it's bright outside.
Like right now. So if we were fishing now, we'd probably have something lighter on.
Yeah. One typical fly that I would use on a day like this would be Laxa Blau, you know, one of the local patterns. Light blue, also like white wing with a bright white wing, and many light colored patterns on a bright day like this. And then when the evening comes, I like to use more silver, maybe black, darker flies.
Overcast day. It's basically raining.
Yeah.
Is that big fly day, small fly? And I know every pool is probably different as well, but is there any kind of general guideline you try to follow?
I try to look a lot at the temperature. Whenever the temperature is above 10 degrees Celsius, which is 50 Fahrenheit, I like to go light on top, and many times hitch flies. Skating flies on top.
Okay, so hitch fly, that's the one that runs along the surface.
Yeah.
And man, when those fish follow that, it can be a little scary when they take a fly on the hitch.
A little scary.
Yeah. Now let's go back, because I know if you're going Atlantic salmon fishing, it's like depending on where in the world you are, that gear is really specific for that. In Iceland, I know the gear we brought. What do you recommend if somebody says, hey, I want to come to the Myrechrist, I've heard about this river, it's so special. What rod, what line, leader, tippet, stuff like that should they be bringing?
Yeah, so first of all, we fish basically just 8 weights, single hand rods, all floating lines, and typically use 9-foot leader, 20 pound, 16 pound, in that range. Always good to have, you know, an extra spool with 16 pound or 20 pound. In case we go down on the size of the fly, we go down on the tippet. But the fish are not that leader shy.
Yeah, and 20-pound tippet, that'll hold the fish.
Yeah.
Most of them. Yeah. Most of them.
Yeah. We usually never use any sink tips for the Atlantic salmon here on the Myrechrist. We we adjust the weight on the fly. That way we can adjust the depth, because it's not a very deep river, so no sinking lines are necessary.
So I hope you're hearing very clearly from Gilbert. This is one of the reasons why I like to host trips at this lodge. Easy wading. At times you don't even have to go into the river. That's just awesome. Single hand rods. Now I know some people out there saying, oh, but I love to throw my two-handeds. I love those spey rods. Like, they're awesome. But you don't need them here, because you can make a cast and it's across the river, which is a wonderful thing, because then you don't have to focus so much on the cast. You can focus on the placement, and then something else I want to pick your brain about, the manipulation of the line. Can you talk through, why do you mend one way versus another? What are you trying to do? What are you trying to have that fly do?
The main goal is to put the fly on top of the fish and let it drift above their head as long as possible, so it doesn't just flush across fast. You want to mend the line so that the flies just stays right on top of their head as long as possible.
Okay, so you're trying to keep it in the pool or wherever we think they are.
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly.
For me, that's one of the toughest parts, because it's like mend upstream, mend downstream,
Big
hold your
mend.
rod out. He yells at me because I make my trout mends. I'm more of a trout fly fisher, and Gilbert's saying, "Hey, it's a mend, Tim, not this little thing." And that's something that you learn kind of on the fly while you're here. But man, it's a fun learning experience, especially when you have that Atlantic salmon on after you make that successful mend. Before we continue, please pause and like this video, which tells me you enjoyed this style of video and you'd like to see more like it. Thank you ahead of time. All right, picture this. You're in the middle of the Maracas River. You just made that mend. You're drifting, everything's going well, and you start to do your little retrieve. Small fly, small retrieve. Tap, you start to feel something. What do you do next?
You want to let the line just slide through your finger, and you count to 3, and then you slowly lift.
Gosh. And it is tough. I wish I could tell you that I followed that advice every time. I didn't, because there are times you're in the middle of strip, 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 and it eats on that strip. So you're almost pulling it from the fish. But I think we have to visualize, we have this fish that's seeing something above its head. It's coming up to take that. It's taking it and then turning. So what you're wanting to do, you're wanting that fly, if I say this right, you want that fish to turn, that fly to get lodged in one of the corners as it swims away, and you're setting the rod as it swims away.
Exactly.
So it's not always a 3-second wait, because there are times where that fish comes up, you see it turning away, swimming away, you can set the hook. But know that that 3-second, that God save the queen, whatever mantra people use, that's there's kind of that general rule. But you also have to say, hey, you're fishing. So we're here around the last week of July, because this tends to be the peak season for salmon fishing, meaning we have a lot of fresh salmon coming into the river, gives us really great opportunities to catch them. That's how every angler has actually landed one this week. We've had fish, they've been caught in every single beat. But let's talk a little bit about the beat system, because I think that's new for a lot of trout anglers. Can you talk through the 4 beats of the Maracas and how it kind of works and how we rotate through them?
So there are 4 beats, and it's over an area that covers 50 miles of water.
Wow.
And each beat has specific amount of pools, and we try to hit as many pools as we can per session. And you do, for example, beat 4 in the morning, and then in the afternoon you switch beat and you go downstream. So you'll fish another beat, and that way you will always keep fishing new pools, new water, and have better chances of getting into those fresh fish.
So tonight I'll be fishing beat 4, tomorrow morning beat 3, and we're just kind of working in that descending order. Hopefully the fish are coming up, we're working down, we bump into them along the way. All right, so we got into you setting the hook. So we have the hook set, they're holding the fish, it's about to make its run. Like, what happens next?
You really want to play the fish by the line at first. You want to wait until you have control over the fish before you get it on the reel. Many people tend to hurry too fast to get it on the reel, and I've seen people reel up in a hurry and shake the rod tip, and they actually shake off the fish that way.
Yes, it happens trout fishing too.
Yeah, and the fish tend to swim straight at you many times, and if you have it on the reel, there's no way you're gonna reel up that slack. So you gotta be prepared to strip fast.
I'm in the pool, I have a fish on, I'm fighting it by my line. It starts to run upstream or downstream. Do I stay there or do I chase it?
I like to stay perpendicular to the fish. It's okay to have a little downstream angle, it's okay to have a little upstream angle, but preferably like run up and down on the bank and stay perpendicular to the fish. I feel like that is the best way to land the fish.
What about rod angle? It seems like the recommendation was to have more of a steep rod angle versus side pressure. Any thoughts on that?
So there's a lot of rocks and there's a lot of sharp rocks in the river. So many times it's best to just keep the rod as high as possible.
Yeah.
Sometimes when we want the fish to stay in the pools, I tend to tell my anglers to go sideways and upstream with the rod just to keep the head close to the bank. That usually keeps them staying in the pool.
Yeah. All right, so we have an angler, we're fighting the fish, everything's going well. What's the cue for you to say, all right, I think we're ready to land this fish? What do you start to look for to say, all right, I'm gonna get my net, we're there?
Yeah, so what I try to look for is if the fish goes on its side and if it comes up to the surface slow, that's usually an indication that the fish is starting to get tired.
Yeah.
And that's when I start to get prepared with the net.
And then the fun starts. And it seems like just when he gets that net ready, these fish just have like one more gear. It's like they start coming over, they start turning sideways, and then they're gone again. And he can have a little coffee, just hang out a bit because he knows these fish are they're just feisty. They're fighters. They want to keep going the whole time. For those of you who've been following my channel for years, know that I am like married to trout, but I'm just kind of dating Atlantic salmon. I mean, this is something they're a lot of fun, but I can tell you, I wasn't up for a full Atlantic salmon experience. So whenever I put together this hosted trip, I decided let's do 6 sessions for Atlantic salmon, 6 sessions for brown trout. You're probably looking at some of the brown trout that we've caught throughout this week because they have been just absolutely insane. We're talking like 17, 18 inches has kind of been the cookie cutter brown trout, which is just absolutely wild. Many on dry flies, streamer eats, nymphs. I mean, it's just everything has been happening this week. But the nice thing is in your back pocket, you still have those Atlantic salmon. 6 sessions of that. And by a session, the way it works at the Miracrest Lodge, we have a morning session, so you fish for around 5 hours. Then we come back, we have a little siesta, we have a little lunch, take a little nap, take a break, make a YouTube video. Then we go out for the evening fishing. We have about a 5-hour evening fish, come back, have dinner, hang out for a little bit, go to sleep, wake up, and do the whole thing again. Total of 12 fishing sessions. It's worked out really well. I plan on doing this experience a few more times. If you're interested in an experience or a trip like this, please check out my website, which is troutandfeather.com/travel. There's a listing of all my trips there. I noticed throughout this week, we fished with a variety of flies. Sometimes these small, little, pretty flies, sometimes sunrays, sometimes heavily weighted flies. What's the difference between them? And I know there's not like one standard approach, but why is it maybe in one pool we'll run a sunray first, then something small, versus in another pool we're just going right to a small pattern?
Whenever we are fishing with sunrays, it's like putting on a search engine, basically. We search for fish and we want to see a reaction. And I usually put that on if I'm not certain that there's a fish in the pool. And usually if I get a reaction on the sunray and it doesn't take the fly, I switch over to a small fly. Okay. And that usually works out. It takes a small fly.
Okay, so sunray is Google, and then you follow it up with something that like, hey, it's bright day, we might go a light colored fly.
Oh yeah, just deliver the ice cream.
Okay. I noticed throughout this week, we also fished another fly called the Hexagon Red Francis. A little bit more weight. What was the approach to that one?
So whenever we come to a new pool, we always try to start out light. So light, small flies. If that doesn't work, we try to go a little bit heavier just to get down a few more inches, and that could be the key. So
from what I'm hearing, it's almost like a top-down approach where it's like we don't want to really just go right into that and just hit that pool hard. We'd rather start top, start soft if possible, then kind of work our way to the fish.
Exactly.
And they tend to be pretty aggressive too.
Oh yeah, when they're fresh like this, it's usually pretty easy to get them to take a fly on top. Whenever that doesn't work, we try to do whatever it takes to get them.
Okay, and now here's my final question for you. Why are these fish eating? Because from what I understand, they're really, this food is of no value to them nutritionally. So when they get in this river, they're really not here to eat.
No, exactly.
What's your thought? What's going on? Why are they eating these flies?
I think it's a territorial thing. Whenever something comes into their territory, they want the stuff out of there. So they either chase it or they just smack it and try to bite it. whatever it takes to get it out of there. And I also have another theory, and that is from when they were small par and growing up and feeding in the river, before they go down to the ocean, they eat, and they tend to eat a lot on top. So for example, if a caddis is skating across the river, that could remind them of when they were par. So I think it definitely has a instinct from when they were small par.
The one thing I was going to ask Gilbert about was, like, what should people bring when they come here? But don't worry, I've already done that homework for you. I put together a list of all the items to bring. We're talking gear, raincoats, what you need whenever you're staying in the lodge. Shoot me an email. It's on the screen right now. It's tcammisa@gmail.com, and I will email you my packing list whenever I come fly fishing in Iceland. All right, Gilbert, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule. It's a pleasure to talk with you about Atlantic salmon, fish with you, and Iceland Fishing Guide, this place is just insane. We really appreciate you.
Thank you so much for coming over here, Tim. It was a pleasure to have you.
Thanks, Gilbert. All right, as you can tell, I absolutely love spending time in Iceland, but let's not stop this fun yet. I put together a bunch of videos when I've been over here, and I put them together in a playlist just for you. You can click that playlist. It's showing on the screen right now. Enjoy the fun, enjoy the learning. You can thank me later.